for some reason, Ben seems to be excited about that, so we're going to be excited about that as well. Thanks, Ben. I'm proud because, you've been on so many episodes, so I have to thank you, Ben, for coming on and participating in Debt Nation and making it what it is. But 200 episodes, I'm excited.
Classic show.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. 200, 400, 600, 800. Let's keep going. All right. So let's firstly thank Thrivous. I want to thank Thrivous for being a great sponsor through a lot of these episodes, especially here on the new channel. If you know the rules. If you want some free Thrivous, you follow the rules in the description. It goes from $5 all the way up to $160 worth of free Thrivous. Fantastic deal. You won't get that anywhere else on the internet. Nootropics and geoprotectors. Also, I want to thank David Kelly. I am transhuman. That's fantastic. David Kelly's got new posts coming out all the time on that page. So thanks, Dave Kelly. All right, so we got Benzion 2020, and we got Mr. Ellman here. Before we go into the dirty book of secrets, i.e. the patent industry, UFOs, we're going to talk about it all. Let's cross over to Mr. Ellman, and would you like to just introduce yourself to the audience? You're a newcomer to Debt Nation. You're new here. You've come in at a stressful time in the world. I mean, you're working from home. Things are changing around the world. Everything's changing. We're on a pivotal point. So introduce yourself to the audience, and also tell us a little bit about your experience with this COVID-19 and the virus and how you're coping with it and what you think it means for the world.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Steele. Absolutely. Congratulations on the 200th show. A little bit about myself, I guess. I work in sales right now. I'm working from home. Got a pretty eclectic background, things for music, cannabis. Right now, working in collections. But this COVID-19 thing is definitely pretty wild. I've been stuck here at home for a couple weeks now, not really trying to get out anywhere. My family, actually, they all live, the house is right on the border of Larchmont and New Rochelle in New York. So New Rochelle was like that ground zero spot where the National Guard first came into.
Wow.
And so it was definitely pretty freaky to me to just kind of, I was just there like a month ago or so, not even maybe, for my mom's 60th birthday. So just traveling there and back, it was pretty concerning. And then within a week of returning back to here in Denver, Colorado, I've just kind of been hanging out at home doing nothing, making sure I'm not getting infected or infecting others.
Yeah.
But it's going to be pretty. But like I said, I work in commercial collections, so I mean, I look over bankruptcy files, and I'm trying to help with client management and try to go through different things, monitor credit and see when things need to go. And right now, just this tidal wave of bankruptcies that we're kind of expecting. Everyone's just kind of waiting right now to see what kind of relief's going to come, and then once these Chapter 11s start coming, it's just going to be a tidal wave. So
yeah, well, I want to know in Australia, what bankruptcy I could invest in, because I have money to invest, but this is where all the money's going now. If you're in bankruptcy, or if you're in repo, or if you're in house evictions, this is the time to be in business, because this is all going up. Well, different governments around the world are responding in different ways. They're looking at a UBI here in Australia to help what they're calling build a bridge for the economy to the other side. The big problem about this whole COVID-19 idea is nobody knows what the other side is. What is the other side? How long until we have drugs and vaccines? I noticed the NASDAQ and the Dow is the S&P 500 and the Dow is rallying today, but is this a fool's rally? What we call a fool's rally, in the fact that the underlying economy is tanking because of the lack of activity, and it's just paper. It's just paper propping up these markets. It'll be really interesting to see if this is just a fool's rally, or if this $2 trillion stimulus package that's been passed will actually have a dent. I am in the camp of saying that this $2 trillion stimulus package is not going to have a sufficient impact in carrying the economy over. It's more like a Band-Aid, and we will have to see what happens there. Will that need more? Again, this is the stupid Keynesian policies that have been promoted, and we're up bumping against Armageddon now because of Keynesianism. Not happy about that, but anyway. Benzion 2020, good to see you. How are you, sir? Thanks for coming on the last show. We're talking about ending the FDA, a very, very important proposal. How are you, sir?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Excited to talk about people. People are already responding to our little in joke about storming Area 51, and but in all seriousness, this United States government does have a dirty book of secrets. There are many things which, in the fullness of time, could be revealed by things like the Freedom of Information Act, and these are serious matters. Yesterday, we did a different kind of show about revolution in the Food and Drug Administration, leading to the type of organization that could support radical life extension, administration, in fact, something that I feel very strongly about. And I do believe that this kind of openness goes hand in hand. So I'm looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We do want to get rid of the FDA and replace it with the Radical Life Extension Administration or some derivative administration that changes the psychology. All right, but the system that we have now is corrupt, it's broken, and it's shady. Mr. Ellman, can you please open up on a salvo of what you think the order looks like, the system looks like from your perspective in terms of the patent system, in terms of hoarding technologies, in terms of suppressing innovation, suppressing technological advancement and human advancement. Is there a conspiracy? And what is that conspiracy look like? What open salvo on the patent industry and the suppressing of technology and innovation?
Absolutely can touch on a lot of that. Well, to start, I think that what's interesting is just the way that the secrecy that was derived from a lot of the aerospace technology that was found in different projects with different companies. Such as you had the what was that one program over at Lockheed Martin? I can't recall the name of, but these different programs where there was a quote I remember seeing that it would take an act of God to get some of these technologies out. I remember the individual who was in charge of this program that I can't recall the name of discussed about they had the technology to take ET home. And that was just, I think that a lot of the stuff that they tie in with the extraterrestrial topic with all of that stuff is just some counterintelligence to really hide the technology that's there. And, the patents that would be related to them are, held in this secrecy, domain, in regards to patents. And I'm sure that to an extent there are pharmaceutical patents in a very similar realm. And, it'd be very interesting for me to just really understand to what degree, facets of our government are willing to defend the corporatocracy that exists in place because of, the infrastructure and, the design that were put in place when we started integrating these corporate and government, initially military projects together, so that certain things could be done that wouldn't necessarily be released. It wouldn't be that the Freedom of Information Act wouldn't really be governing stuff that's happening behind closed doors in a corporation. It's not really the same thing. So you can imagine what's going on in the aerospace technology. But so then when it comes to pharmaceutical industries, the amount of money that's just in that entire pharmaceutical industrial complex that is really built and designed to create patients. Nothing about it has anything to do with curing or resolving anything. It's just about a piggy bank. Really, it's just all fine. So it's hard for me to imagine that there isn't some kind of wild degree of protection that comes to not allowing certain things to come into place that might benefit, might put medical assistance into our own hands, at home kits. Something I talk about a lot is this idea of a toilet or a sink or shower that analyzes your waste or the sweat or things like that, and will let you know if you've got any diseases, viruses, if there's any type of deficiencies in your body. And you can even have something like that all in some one main database. You could even have public places like that. You have this coronavirus outbreak. If every public urinal, tested you for a list of whatever types of diseases, it would be really easy to figure out where it is. Screw following everybody around with their Facebook data, but then it comes to the privacy of this biometric stuff. But
yeah, you know what I think has just happened here. Dwight D. Eisenhower has
been fully realized.
I think this happened here. I think Dwight D. Eisenhower has just been resurrected in the form of Mr. Ellman here. I think he's come back to tell us and warn us about
Well, I definitely heeded his warning.
The United States has a reputation, I think, well deserved, for being a place that is rather anti-intellectual. We have a lot of institutions, a lot of culture that does not value the kinds of things that we're talking about. But there is argument to be made that we could be a lot less anti-innovation, and I think that discussions of this kind, wherein we are talking about the transparency of institutions. This is a really important confluence of ideas, and I don't want to keep directing it back to the Food and Drug Administration at this point, because we are doing a different show. But there is quite a lot to discuss there. I mean, what else do you think? You mentioned, Brent, that we could be doing a lot more analysis of our environment, a lot more analysis of ourselves. Both of these kind of products, the tricorder and the sort of analyzer type products have existed in some basic prototype form, but are not really being brought to market in a real way. What else do you see holding back technology in general, or holding back medical technology? We're transhumanists. The thing that separates us from other techno-progressives is an interest in longer lifespans. So I would tend to bring it back to that. But what do you think, Brent? What do you think, Steele? What's holding us back?
I'd like to hear what you have to say, Steele. I was chatting for quite a minute there.
No. Well, I'm interested to hear what you say. I'm just listening. I'm just enjoying this.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I am a transhumanist, and I definitely, there's definitely a lot of libertarian stuff that I appreciate as well, just due to my, distrust of, this giant government corporatocracy that we're discussing. And, I think that my big concern was, if you're analyzing this type of biometric data, if, I'm worried about the type of, privacy that the data that they're already analyzing, is imposing on, and what, it's just, I don't really, it's just very strange to be thinking or talking about something, and then suddenly seeing it instantly in my feed on a social media site. And just to imagine that, my biometric data being analyzed and used like that. I haven't used, these DNA, analysis companies for a reason. So to think that every public urinal might be having something like this would be concerning to me, on that libertarian side. But then the, transhumanist side of me thinks, oh, that would be a really easy way to determine, who has coronavirus. You could just, have a very quick thing that's in, some kind of, either in a sink, faucet that goes into, where the water's going down, or in the drain, or in the urinal, or in the toilet, and you could just have it analyze some kind of, waste product there.
You're bringing up a really good point.
I was on a show this morning, Steele.
What?
Go on.
I'm just watching the live news here on in Singapore, and they're talking about all of this stuff now, and the Singapore government is saying that they're going to expand their powers in terms of biometrics, in terms of Bluetooth tracking, in terms of I just missed the briefing's just gone here, but they're going to, but they don't want to carry it over after. They don't want their expanded powers to carry over after the COVID-19 outbreak, but they are going to invoke these emergency powers in the short run. So they definitely have the capacity to do this in a place like Singapore. This is a good test scenario for an outbreak like this. This is a small country with a big population, a rich country with a big transitory and migratory population as well. lots of trade and commerce, lots of people moving through it. So it's gonna be quite interesting in this respect.
Hong Kong
But
is doing that too. The Bluetooth tracking, I think, to some degree.
yes,
They have
yes.
a similar set of concerns to Singapore, and perhaps more so in this particular discussion because of their more significant exposure to COVID-19 and the resurgence of COVID-19 there in recent days. And that is specifically tied to the travel that you mentioned.
Yeah.
This being a hub of the kind that it is, they are at a higher risk for these continued resurgences.
So, Mr.
And
Ellman, I want to ask you because you bring up two really good points here, and this is something I'm going to talk about with the chairman Gennady as well. And it's something I struggle with, Ben Zion, and it's something I think a lot of transhumanists and libertarian type thinkers all struggle with. And what you're essentially talking about isn't so much patents, but it's more about your privacy versus collectivist notion of advancing tech and database technology. Even if that database chip technology is somehow plonked onto a blockchain, how do we manage this? Because in all areas of life, you're hitting on something really good here, but the core is that it's an argument of technology versus privacy. But how do we mitigate it so it doesn't have to be these two separate debates of I want privacy and I also want technological advancement. On one hand, I want my rights to my healthcare. For example, we had Jason Mallory come on, and he was talking about a healthcare app where your healthcare would go onto the here, and it'd be accessible. But also, you want privacy, and you don't want it to be hacked, and you don't want it to be so. This is a new philosophy. It's a new type of philosophy that you're hitting on that's really hard to bridge because we want both things simultaneously. They seem to bump heads. They seem to be antithetical to each other. It's like antimatter and matter colliding together. But there must be a way to mitigate, to work these two strategies together so that we can get the best possible solution with our, for example, healthcare or our patent system, and yet still retain some sort of privacy that people are comfortable with, especially when we're talking about genomes, genetics, or DNA, or your health records, your financial records, which is slowly becoming less and less relevant. But you all this sort of stuff. What do you say to that? This is a great point, but the core of it is very, very difficult. It's a new type of philosophy.
I think that I think that a big issue right now is that this degree of privacy and technology, there needs to be some kind of I don't know about a flip-flop, but at least some kind of leveling where the privacy that's occurring on the governmental corporatocracy side of things with technology versus what we have with, because that's the issue, is that they're not willing to give up their technology. What if China hears about it or Russia hears about it or, who knows, and so that's where that secrecy must come from, and then, the degree of, national security that gets involved. So there's got to be some other, but regardless of that, I think that, coming back with this, I think that paradoxically, like you said with antimatter, I think that that's where capitalism is a great, help, as much as I hate to say it, as much as I hate those words coming out of my mouth, I don't hate it, but to be encouraging capitalism. But I think that the fact that you create a situation where the democracy is that we vote with our dollar, and something that I've actually thought about, discussed some people, to just kind of digress for a second, is this idea of universal basic income, and maybe a way to sell it to people would be to encourage it to be done where people are getting paid to do something such as vote, and so that it's not just for nothing. And then, it's increasing the democratic, environment. And I think that similarly, if we have that money, we're voting with every dollar we spend on, corporations that we think are the right ones that we want to put our money with, the ones that we trust. Right now, we're in a situation where, we're all consistently choosing the lesser of two evils or 100 evils, whether we're talking about any side of, any of it. But go on.
Sorry, I cut you off. I really didn't mean to cut you off there. You were on such a great roll, and you brought up a lot of really good points here. Obviously, universal basic income, the UBI plan being a great point. Not just in this COVID-19 situation where you have to mitigate your human capital against existential risks or economic annihilation, but also, in other processes such as voting. This is an interesting fact in the United States. It's non-compulsory voting, which means there's not really equal representation. But also, we do kind of stand at a crossroads here in human history, where it's right now. The world. We've been talking about the corporatocracy, the government and the corporates working together, and right now, it looks like the governments are in control of the world. I mean, they've been able to shut down a lot of they've been able to keep people at home. They've been able to buy up whole industries. For example, the airlines industry. These corporations just do not look as strong as they purport to be. They don't. Governments are definitely in control of the situation in the world right now. But it's just a we stand at a sort of a crossroads of history where what do we go down? We go down the more government road, or we go the more corporate road, or can we find a middle?
I think that's a big. I think that's something that's what people always look back is that, like you were talking about that app with healthcare. I have an app with my healthcare and it's all right there, but it's private. It's mandated that I have to have it pretty much, but it's I think that people think that if there's this public option, there's not going to be the private option, that we're all going to be stuck in some gulag because we're talking out of line, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just that the people that don't have, and the people that have don't care about the have-nots, because But then it's like most people still aspire for more. And so I think that, like education's another great one where it's, public school up till 12th grade, that's perfectly all right. But after that, it's socialism, like how does that work? But it's not like those private colleges are going to shut down just because suddenly you have the opportunity, to go to a school without putting yourself in a amount of debt.
The other thing you brought up here, which is I want to just touch on very briefly before we go on, is, what free market capitalists, especially Milton Friedman types or others, what they say? They say it's always up to the consumer to buy the products and buy conscientiously. They don't buy on price. So if a market participant is behaving bad, don't buy the product, and then you'll punish them. But we know because of market psychology, people usually buy on price. I mean, it's very hard. Nike abused people all over the world. Coca-Cola's done the same. A bunch of these companies have abused people and labor markets and polluted rivers and done awful things. And there have been NGOs set up all over the world saying, don't buy their product. This is consumer awareness. Don't buy their product. If you buy their product, you're sponsoring slavery. And yet people turn around and they show off their Nike stuff, and they pay these basketball players to wear Nike stuff or drink Coca-Cola, and these companies go on and they have no social conscience, and they do it on price, and they have an addictive product, and they get away with this stuff. So obviously, just relying on the consumer to do the right thing, buying an Apple iPhone means you're paying Foxconn. Buying an Apple iPhone means you're paying Foxconn. If you're paying Foxconn is the same company that has to put nets around their company, around their factories in China to stop people from killing themselves, because so many people jump off their roofs because they're below slave wage, right? And this is one of the biggest companies in the world. I mean, Foxconn is massive. So you're buying an iPhone and you're saying, well, this is a great product, but people are jumping off the roofs to make that product for you. So obviously the consumer en masse, individually, you or Benzion or somebody else might boycott a product, but it doesn't mean anything en masse. So obviously the consumer is not the answer. This is a failure of free markets because consumers don't respond to social problems. They respond to price, they respond to quality, and they respond to what they need in their own life. How do you respond to that? Do you think there needs to be a shift in economic thought going forward?
Yes. Was that question for me?
Well, whoever.
Yeah. Yes. So there, we talked a little bit about very real concerns of individual liberties, and also balancing that against technological progress and against high functioning institutions of other kinds. And my feeling, for the most part, is that we really need to set aside some of these sometimes childish discussions about what personal freedom is, unless it really addresses an economic concern, a serious danger to oneself deriving from something else, or a credible existential risk. If it doesn't address those kinds of things, you're really just kind of whistling a sad song that I don't want to hear. There is an awful lot of that right now. There's people who are talking constantly about how the United States is going to devolve into this or that, how martial law is going to be imposed, and maybe those are all good things to be discussing, but we have to also consider what we are actually saying and doing in the world. To what end are we organizing? I want to see a universal super longevity. I want to see a technology used in more sophisticated ways. I alluded to this discussion.
But Ben Zion, like we're talking about corporate power here and the way they get their corporate power. Because once you figure out the base, then Mr. Ellman comes in and he says, well, then they scoop up all the patents at the top and they work with the government, and then they hold these secrets, this dirty book of secrets, in behind these walls behind me, or in Congress or something, and they hold these technologies back, and essentially, individuals on the very basic level respond to certain concerns, but as a mass, they actually empower. It's not even Stockholm syndrome. It's just the generic input-output of human interaction with the system.
The main thing that we would reasonably do to deconstruct this is something that I believed in literally my whole life. I've told people this before. I grew up on BBSs. I cannot remember a time I did not know hackers. I've been some kind of left libertarian or anarchist my whole life. And I believe that we should radically deconstruct the intellectual property rights, such as they are, so that these are things that are owned in actual physical property is something that's owned by individuals, and most other things are not really held in the way that they are today. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about Freedom of Information Act concerns that we discussed here at the top of the show. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a corporatocracy. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about all of these things. City-states came up today in this discussion of Hong Kong. I was on a think tank talk about Hong Kong, and we were talking about how the COVID-19 outbreak is conceivably going to have ripple effects as large as the effects of the Second World War.
Yes.
And in the aftermath of the Second World War, there was a tripling in the number of nation states. The number of nation states went from a relatively small number up to up to 100 over the course of, admittedly, some decades.
Yeah, it was
thereafter.
decolonization. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that events like this Black Swan event that we're experiencing could lead to a proliferation of city-states. And I would like to point out that there is a good deal of evidence that world governments are holding back the operations of smart cities and crypto cities and tech-based municipalities of various kinds. And this is something that, again, I believe that a fully realized smart city could achieve a universal super longevity within that municipality in the way that a place like the United States could not. And we have to discuss these things as well.
I know you don't believe me about. I know you don't believe anything I say about China, Benzai, in 2020. I know you don't believe a single word that comes out of my mouth. But I talked with Larissa, who's the CEO of Phoenix, a couple of shows ago. I said it's pretty easy to see the CCP will fall, and in their place will rise a bunch of city-states all around China. China will turn into a huge conglomerate of city-states.
Steel. I mean, I remember my grandfather saying that in 1991.
1991 isn't that long ago on huge geopolitical trajectories.
China is about to cease to exist. It didn't quite happen that way. It could happen. It could happen.
It is going to happen, Bedzai, in 2020. I'm telling you, it's going to happen, and they're going to rise up to be a bunch of city-states.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Just like Dubai or Abu Dhabi or something. These places are primed for the city-state revolution. I think this is the way of the world. I think I agree with you. I think. Well, what do you say, Mr. Ellman? Get in on this debate.
I was going to.
Mr. Ellman, let's cross over to Mr. Ellman. I want to know what he thinks about city-states and the rise of secret technologies.
Well, I was just more sort of touching on with China, the whole idea of these concentration camps that they've got out there with all those Muslims and whatnot, and it just blows my mind that just continues to go on, and every once in a while it pops up in the media, and there's just nothing that's done because everybody's just
the
so
quality
financially
of life,
tied to China.
The quality of life in those concentration camps seems to be better than the quality of life right now in our concentration camps on the border. That's
I don't know. That's what we're being told, but I mean,
that's true.
Where are they getting all their
serious transparency issues?
Their whole organ situation in conjunction with, but that's just a whole nother one.
What a fun conversation! who can discriminate more against the minority community? Woohoo! Can the Uyghurs go down more, or the Latinos? Woohoo! What a great fun conversation! But no, it is a good talking point. The Uyghurs have been abused and mistreated horrifically. And human rights campaigns are not allowed to go up there into Uyghur territory and check out what's going on there. They get and this is part of this talk that you were having, Mr. Ellman, of privacy, because these Uyghurs are tracked and trapped and facially they have their face recognition thing, and they're basically however we're living on a lockdown now, they've been living on a lockdown forever. That's just how they live. That's pretty much normal behavior for them. A restricted movement, restricted access, all of that, that's completely normal for them. So what you're experiencing now, this diminishment of freedom, that's normal everyday life. That's not even, that's just everyday life for those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. No. And I mean, on top of that, though, and it's a bit of speculation, but the rates of the organs that are being sold and coming out of China, and like the sourcing, I remember reading a good deal about that. The evidence was there that there was just a tremendous amount of these organs coming in from the black market, just shady places, and they were just fraudulently defining where the origins were. And it just seemed to me, just adding it all up, it just seemed very clear that they were, I think I remember reading articles as well in like mainstream media sources talking about taking these organs out of the Uyghurs while they were still living, I believe. I don't remember exactly what it was.
The Falun Gong community was a huge community of semi-religious religious autocrats or religious community, semi-spiritual religious community, and of course for internal political machinations in the CCP meant that they had to find a minority community to attack, and they decided to basically call the Falun Gong spiritual community, a terrorist organization, which allowed them to increase the police state to a point where the directors could jump around inside of the CCP and inside of the party, and by suppressing those people, basically the premier, whatever his name was back in 2006, he basically got his job by doing this, and the byproduct of that was, the organ harvesting. That was just the byproduct of it. So, so you see all those people all protesting around all the time. When things get, when life restarts, when people can actually walk around again. But you see those people protesting all the time, and that was a political play internally by the CCP. Is it distressing? Yes. Is it predictable? Absolutely. This is communist type.
A little too predictable.
communist type entities always do that sort of stuff, and that's really bad. But the United States has its own.
It's almost
forms
capitalistic, though. The way that the sales that are occurring though with those organs, just there's parts of it just that seem like they either took a note out of the CIA's book or they are getting some help. It's just like, where did they get the buyers?
I want to go back to the
Exactly.
this sort of black swan as a triggering event for geopolitical shifts, because I think there's two important points that you've made here. The idea that the United States and China are going to consolidate power in the wake internally and in many other respects in the wake of this kind of thing. There have been quite a lot written on those subjects. And that is most certainly the case. It's because I said that perhaps in 10 years, we might see more city-states than we otherwise would have without the coronavirus. It doesn't mean that the main thing that is happening here is not rather authoritarian. I don't know what else is your read on China. You're a China walk, Steele. What's happening with China?
Well, yeah. Well, let's pivot away from China for a bit. Let's go back to the United States. I want to keep talking to Mr. Ellman. So, what do you think? Dwight D. Eisenhower? You're resurrected from the grave and you're back to talk to us. What type of technologies do you think are being held in the from the public view? What is it? Life extension? Is it aerospace? Is it biotech? Is it what type of technologies and what type of impact will they have on society?
I think it's hard to define the specific technologies as much as you could point a finger at just the stifling that's occurring. I think that when the research that is happening is funded by the companies that stand to make or lose money, depending on how the results are, then how is that not, a variable itself? And so I think that that's really slow where just these studies can be done.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways to prove this what you're saying is correct, and it's researchable, it's easy to find, it's well-known information, is the oil industry and big energy. And they have, since the 80s, since the 70s, since the beginning of the petrodollar cycle, they have always accumulated patents that disrupt the oil and petrochemical industry. Whether that be because of the petrodollar cycle or whether that be because of the free flow of oil and gas, as you guys call it in the United States, to power the economy and power cars. Because the margins on gas, or as I don't like that word in the United States because you can confuse it with actual natural gas, which we call it petrol here in Australia, which is a better term, because you've got oil, petrol, and gas as opposed to what you guys have. But anyway, I think it's extremely difficult. This is easily researchable, easy quantifiable. They buy perpetual energy machines. They suppress the electric car. They've done a lot of work to suppress battery technology and a lot of stuff to ensure that their business cycle can continue. Now, if you take that model of getting oil out of the ground and using it to fuel the economy and making on the margins, then all you have to do is replay that model into exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Ellman, into healthcare, into finance, into consumer staples, into every other walk of life. And if you have a healthy profit business model and that's got good margins, and you have a disruptive technology that could disrupt your own model, buy that technology, suppress that technology, and continue to make on the margins until it's no longer profitable. And right now is this with this COVID-19, a lot of these business models are being disrupted because they rely on certain mechanics to function. And that's why the markets are crashing, because they don't have an alternative. So you should see theoretically a big rush of technologies now coming out to try and make up for the inefficiencies in these systems. Sorry, Mr. Ellman, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about petroleum and oil, and a whole another side of it, when you were talking about translating that over to these other aspects of society, and the influence that comes from it, just the psychological influence, the stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the film Mirage Men, and they talk about, the counterintelligence measures that are, kept to preserve these, methods, of extraction of petroleum in that scenario. But, the degrees to which they were willing, and then you can translate that over to the medical side. Like a great example is, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where these people were, it's just like, what does it take? What are the implications of the fact that there was this large group of people that were, infected with syphilis, and then they were in a situation where no matter who they went to potentially as a doctor, they were never going to determine that that was the case. Were they given something to mask it in their blood? And the fact that this, pharmaceutical industry is playing into this stuff. It's just, what are the other potentials? And then, then you see Bill Gates, he's getting in trouble in India, and so it's, and you got to wonder, what are they hiding? Because if that's what's coming up, what are they hiding? If they're putting all that much money into hiding it from us, they're just giving us a bone every once in a while to make us think we found something.
Benzone, what do you think about that?
Yes. Well, there's, it's not easy. It's not easy to quantify, right? Because we can look at these going concerns and these other institutions and say they provide some value in this area. And so when we're also looking at what is the cost of a lack of true transparency, true creativity, and we live in a networked world now. We live in a world where we can have self-organizing institutions in a way that we could not have before. And so there's a greater opportunity cost to us now in not having more less techno-sluggish and in some way more anarchic kinds of organizations. And we really do have to consider that. For myself, I think that the main thing that it comes down to is what does this world look like in 10 years? Can we have this world of fully automated city-states and basically super longevity within those municipalities? Or are we going to be limited by these behemoths, these authoritarian and cruel and dysfunctional entities to such a degree? And I think this is what the Futurist New Deal, my platform, was designed to address in the near term. It is a economic reform platform, but it is designed to set the stage for that very world where e-governance transitions to voluntarist and minimalist forms of institutions, where everyone has everything that they need to live well. And that is very important. The Futurist New Deal for America, benzion2020.com. I spoke to a friend, Adam Kokesh, today. He wanted to drop in for this 200th show, but he's going to be traveling with myself down to Nueva Santa Cruz to see our friends, Dr. Chris Manu, who's been on the show. And we're going to be promoting that kind of smart city undertaking. He is, of course, a political advocate for localization of governments of this kind as well. And so we are going to be engaging that discussion. And so stay tuned for that exciting development. I do have to drop off the call now, gentlemen. Thank
you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, and good luck at your next meeting. I know you're a busy man, and we will look out for the Santa Cruz. Send my regards to Dr. Manu. Always love Dr. Manu. He's given me so many great ideas, especially here in Australia. And we look forward to the end of this COVID-19, so we can see the resurrection of the Innovation Center that's doing so much work.
I will say another teaser there. Many countries in this specific region that folks like Dr. Manu and other folks, they are on the cusp of developing the Estonia model of e-governance. They are literally hiring people that we know in the Estonian government to help them roll those things out as we speak, because this COVID situation is a double-edged sword, right?
All right. Well, I think Ben's gone.
Absolutely.
All right,
Yes.
Ben.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks, fellas. I'll talk to you
It's
soon.
great chatting with you. Absolutely.
All right, rock on, Ben. Thanks very much. All right, Mr. Ellman, it's just you and me. We'll just take this up to the hour, which is another 15 minutes away, and then I'll let you go.
Cool.
What do you think about that? You're interested in super longevity, right?
Absolutely.
And what?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you think? How do you think the best approach? How do you think we can best get to super longevity? Do you think it's a system change? Do you think we already have the technologies? What do you think, Mr. Ellman?
It's a tough question to answer. On an individual level, I think that what I do is I take a lot of different types of supplements, amino acids, things like that. I think that there are different things you can research, lots of nootropics that are seem pretty interesting. But I think that at the end of the day, that's only going to get us so far. Obviously, I think that technologies, though, like AI and machine learning, when applied to just the ways that they're determining these different drugs right now for coronavirus with different AI machine learning type devices. I think that the telomerase research when that meets, and there's probably already been stuff going on, I'm sure, with machine learning and that whole side of things. And I think that seems pretty promising. And then obviously I think that it's just genetics and focusing on how to be able to manipulate things. And it's a really tough one to answer. There's just so many different answers, but I just see so much progress happening so fast. It's pretty great. And I think this coronavirus thing, I think that it's awful, but I've been staying at home for a couple of weeks, got a stocked fridge, freezer, just kind of hanging out, taking it easy. And I think that there's a lot of bad that's about to happen, a lot of bad that's been happening. Obviously what's been going on in Italy and Spain, just having to just kind of let patients just kind of ride it out until the end. It's upsetting, but I think that the awareness that's setting in on a massive scale of the lacking of a safety net in many regards for many portions of our population, because there's a lot of people that maybe the majority of a voting class in these ridiculous pandered, it's just, come on, it's all just partisan, like, I don't know, but it's just the votes barely even matter. And then when it's not really mattering to you or no one even that's very close to you. But I think this is a situation where it's pretty hard not to see how it's affecting people that are close to us all. And that there's just, it's just, Harvey Weinstein's getting tested, but how many people have I seen discuss the fact that they've been trying to get tested and they can't, but Harvey didn't even, it's just like, obviously, in a prison environment, that's important, but it's just very clear that all these famous rich people are, all having access. And I think that, it's I think that when, and it goes back to, like I said, a lot of people are concerned about, governmental, when you're having that socialist option, but that's what it is an option, and I think that having a base option that's more than enough, people are still going to always consistently, human nature, you want more than you have. But I think that people should just everyone should be born with this, with enough or more than enough. In this time and age, at least, technology is available for it. It's just this, bureaucratic bullshit that stifles it all from actually, coming through. And, I think that there's a lot of stuff, this whole QAnon thing, and there's just so much of this nonsense with this ET technology, which, it's really interesting, but, it's interesting from a science fiction perspective, I think, because, and I think that there are some real aspects to it, but I think that it's, going back to, I forget the guy's name at Skunk Works from Lockheed Martin, but, the idea that that's not coming out, of the, those black budget secrecy things without an active God. And so if that's the case, we can't be relying on these, mystical, trips to outer space that Rick Doty wants to tote around, and it's just kind of, it's like, it's not the right type of hope. It's, Obama kind of hope, and it's just not really what we need. And it's better than, nothing. But I mean, honestly, like, sometimes nothing is like, you're like, wait a minute, I need something. When you're given something, you're like, all right, like, I'm, content. But like, I think, it's like, I don't like Trump, but like, I sure like the fact that everyone's realized that like something smells funny, to say the least, because it's, it's just all these people who've just always been so laissez-faire and thought that everything was just honky-dory for so long are finally pissed off. But it's, and holding it, the government accountable, as much as they can. And, it's just, it's good things can come from bad. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, you're a poet. That you're a poet. This is amazing. Yeah. So there are. I think that, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a double-edged sword. This COVID-19. It's tragedy on one hand, but I think the amount of technology that's about to be spilled over by governments, by governments and corporations that have been holding on to a lot of technology for this sort of event, I think it's going to be spilled out onto the scene, and that'll also be a double-edged sword, because it'll be so quick and so fast that on one hand that's going to put a lot of pressure on the population, because they're not going to know what's happening, and also the advancement of automation, so they won't have jobs to come back to, so it will exacerbate things like unemployment and issues. But on the other hand, it's going to be a huge advancement in humanity, and it's the advancement that we've all been waiting for in a way. That we've all been wanting. It's just happening at an accelerated pace, and it'll be masked by the problems that we face. So we're going to face problems of economic problems, and the world will go crazy for a bit. But the amount of technological spillover is going to be enormous. I think. I have a feeling that this is true. I think this U.S. dirty book of secrets, I think they're going to be opening it up and going into it, because they don't have a choice. And that's the other thing. It's been backed into the corner. The system is now in a systemic collapse, and they're going to have to try and increase productivity in any way they can, which means open up the playbook, open up the patent book, and start releasing some of this technology out into the world. And a UBI is something that will have to be discussed. It's not a fiction anymore. It has to be discussed. Privacy Absolutely. Is going to be the big discussion as the technologies spill out over. I mean, we're seeing already technologies to use for tracking for COVID-19, but how much will governments want to wind back on these policies after the fact? We saw with the U.S. Patriot Act, they didn't wind back. Nobody said, "Oh, that's a bad idea." They just kept it there. You go to the airport, you still get frisked by the TSA. I don't remember, does it still need to be there? I don't know. But, once the government's put these blunt instruments in, they don't seem to really wind them back. So how much should we trust the government that they're going to wind some of this stuff back is up to individual notions, individual points. But yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's going to be fascinating, fascinating time in history. Well, on your front, you said you've got food stocked up there and you're hanging out. It's good to hear. How long do you think you're going to have to do that for? Do you think it's going to be over by Easter, like Trump is saying, or do you think this is going to be a lot longer?
I mean, honestly, I hope that it's not over by Easter, because I just think that, my concern is the folks that really want, the ones that are just like wanting to use this as a situation to take power, they haven't stepped up to the plate yet. They're letting everybody, give it a whack, it seems. At least, and that's just me, conspiring a little bit in my mind, that it's like let them beg for it kind of thing, let them want it, and it's like letting us all out at Easter, just making, it's like the graphs that you see. It's just we're not going to float the curve that way. It's just going to come right back. It's nobody's really healing. You're just going to have more of these folks that are just carriers that are infecting others, and it's really just going to be a damaging thing. And the whole idea that he wants to do it on Easter too is concerning to me as well, because the religious themes with Donald Trump and his whole QAnon, Q+ stuff is just a little bit weird to me. It's just like, I don't know. I think that the idea of 1,000 years of prosperity or whatever, that sounds great. It's aligned with transhumanist thinking. I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm talking about, but they're just this whole idea with Trump and the third temple, and I don't know, just the whole idea that he wants to use Easter to like let us all, so that we can, have the economy rise again is just weird to me. And I don't really, call me a Jew, but meh.
And I like. I should have said this at the start. I like your jacket, by the way. You're a rebel. I like it. I like
Thank
it,
you, sir.
It's a great
space cadet as well.
No, I like it a lot. I think it suits you, and I think it suits the theme. And I feel like a rebel sometimes. Advocating for the United States Transhumanist Party, they've got so many interesting ideas, but and they're a great party. But yeah, I think these are the debates are now. The debates are right now on a lot of this, because a lot of the technologies that we talk about here, they're going to be flooding the market. But are we ready as a society for these rapid changes? Are we ready for super cities, technologically advanced super cities to come in? Are we ready for, somewhere like Israel to become a super advanced technology state? Israel is so advanced. It's going to be amazing. But again, where do you draw the line of privacy? Where do you draw the line of security, individual freedoms versus collectivist type technologies that blockchain? Maybe that's the answer. Maybe God is blockchain. I don't know. Bitcoin Jesus and God blockchain. I don't know. But, it's huge. But where can people look if they want to?
But it goes back to the city states and stuff, like you were saying, where and then also as well, like I was talking about with the universality, where it's you don't have to get the government provided healthcare. You can still get the private one. There's still the option. I think that's the key, is to maintain the freedom. And then going back to privacy and freedom, I think that's another thing where it's as the more freedoms I have, the less I care about my own privacy. It's like when it's like this whole thing with the child predators and molesters, and it's an awful thing, pedophiles. And it's like, yeah, I want to give up all my rights to get all these people to stop fucking with the children. Sure. But it's like, I don't want to give up my rights. But for the reason I don't want to give up my rights is because you want to come after me for this stuff over here as well. But it's like, how about we come to a compromise and we just let some of this stuff over here slide, and we can agree that like those are the actual issues, and then that's there's got to be this compromise, not this authoritarian power grab when we're in the midst of some kind of false flag or otherwise situation. Because I think that's a big issue with the coronavirus as well, is we're so used to this false flag environment that who knows what's to how to interpret it. It's I want to be the right person and not risk exposing myself, or even more so exposing other people, it makes a lot of sense that it's blown out of proportion just because that's what the media does. But I'm just not, I don't want to take that chance. But I mean, I see so many people so fed up with, drinking all that mainstream media Kool-Aid for so long that they're like, oh, I know how this one works. They're bullshitting us. But it's just kind of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf is more kind of what this one seems like to me.
Yeah, and it's also people, the fear radio, fear radio. That has sometimes it's been wrong a lot. I mean, let's take Alex Jones. He's been wrong a lot. I mean, he's called a lot of really bad ideas. But
there's a great example.
There's a policy that if you keep saying the same thing over and over and over again, maybe one day you'll be right. And so he always talks negative, and he always says generic stuff like, they're planning something big. And if he says that every day of the year for 365 days, year over year over year, eventually something happens and it goes, I told you I was planning something big. This is it. And, the media's lying. And And he's got all the ABC organizations sitting there in front of him, and he reads them off, and he's going, "It's the fault of the DIA and the FBI and the CIA and the ABC." So and then it's confusion, and it sows confusion, and people, when they believe it, then, and I'm not saying the mainstream media is perfect, and I criticize them, but I'm also saying that sometimes they have relevant information. And you need to listen to them, and because they have more information, and especially at this point in time, I've been included with the mainstream media a lot lately, reading a lot of articles, reading press releases from governments, and the consensus worldwide is nobody has an idea what's going on. There's not some secret plan. You can read from Azerbaijan to Australia to the US to watch the White House briefings. Unless one person knows, or a tiny group of elites know what's going on, which would be the conspiracy anyway, everybody else doesn't have a clue, and that's been the consensus. Because governments have mishandled this crisis all over the world, and they've handled it differently, and it's all been chaotic. And the geopolitics rolls on. And Iran, for example, if they had any idea, they wouldn't have wanted their geopolitical situation to fall to the point of where they are now. It's crippling them. For example, Italy, no way. This is a disaster. This is how revolutions happen, and people lose power. Spain could have a revolution, Italy could have a revolution, and the ruling elites in those countries could collapse, and they'd have a power change, which would mean that that would be bad for them. They lose their power. So it's not about it could be a bureaucratic thing, but as if some Italian bureaucrat in Rome is planning all this stuff out, it doesn't make sense. So there's different ideas to it all, but as far as I can see, it's chaotic, and you have to just push through the noise, and you have to again, ignore people like Alex Jones. Maybe he's got a point, but when you say they're planning something big, and you say that every day of the year, eventually one day you'll be right, and then you'll just say, "Oh, see, I told you." And that's not real thinking. That's just having enough money to sit there every day and say the same stupid stuff. What do you say to that?
Exactly. It's like, yeah, it just goes back to, the QAnon stuff and the indictments, and then today's a great example of Alex Jones, where, he lost the appeal with this Sandy Hook stuff, where, it's $150,000 or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. But then, going back to another example is QAnon, and the sealed indictments they've been talking about for years, and today, it's Maduro down in Venezuela gets indicted, with those 15 other, political and military leaders and whatnot. And it's, we told you so, and it's like, and, just the other week when it was, those 600 cartel, Jalisco, whatever cartel members, we told you so. And it's like, man, no, like, to me, that just looks like the top dogs taking out the competition, nothing more, nothing less. Maybe there's some more, maybe a little more, maybe a little less sometimes, but I mean, come on.
Well, Mr. Ellman, thank you so much. I want to.
It's like you were saying. To just say one last thing. If there's no.
Yeah. Go. Please go.
Yeah, it's just the idea of just there being this centralized cabal just is a tough one for me to swallow. And that's saying, coming from the perspective of someone who, totally thought that was what was going on for some time, but it just seems like we overlook our own human nature, and I think that there's a lot to be said in, these spiritual teachings about, higher consciousness and the subconscious. And, I think that a lot of that stuff is, but, I think that, it affects all of this geopolitical stuff just in every which way, in how we behave in our subconscious programming, and we in the United States here, the amount of money that goes into training that subconscious programming, it's just, that's a whole nother topic though.
Yeah. And we'll have to get you on with Kristen Conklin from Talk Spectrum for that. You'll find her really, really, really interesting. I'd love to have you back on. I would love to have you back on the show a lot, actually, because I think we get on really well, and I think we have a lot more to talk about. I'd like to arrange more shows with you, actually. But yeah, no, this is some really, really, really good points. And well, if you're locked down, I don't know what else you're doing, but yeah, but who benefits? QE bono. That's the idea, right? Who benefits? Who benefits from all of this trauma? The White House doesn't benefit. It's got a country in collapse now. Xi Jinping doesn't benefit. His whole personhood is under threat. Italy doesn't benefit. Iran doesn't benefit. Nobody benefits. The world, the United Nations doesn't benefit. They're getting their funding cut left, right, and center. So who actually benefits from this global tragedy? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make any sense unless it's... There's only one person I can think of who benefits, and I'm not going to say that because... But anyway, all right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ellman. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. I really want to have you on again soon because I want to talk more because I think...
Thank you still.
I think you got heaps more to talk about. I want to talk more about aerospace. I want to talk more about these secret technologies. I want to talk more about the patent industry. I want to talk about solutions to the patent industry. I want to talk more about health industry, and the health industrial complex, and the emerging biotech, nanotech, information technology, brain systems, revolutions that are coming, and how that will impact our world. I want to talk more about all that stuff, and also I want to see you on some panels too, because I think you're entertaining, you're fun, and you're smart, and you've been great on this show. So thank you, and thank you to Ben Zion 2020 for coming on as well. Thanks to everybody who's supporting Future for Humanity project. The future is in your hands. Thank you very much, everybody who's supporting this channel, keeping us on the air in these trying times. We're going to keep going, and we've got Liz Parrish coming up. We've got a whole bunch of cool people coming up, so make sure you subscribe and share the link out to get some free Thrivous. But thank you, Mr. Ellman. Fantastic. I really had a great time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely. Me too. Looking forward to the next one, without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's Detonation.
Happy 200th.
Yeah, 200 episode. I forgot. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, that's Detonation, where we're busy putting everything bad out of business.